So the words in the analogy, it's very interesting how similar they are thousands of years ago. How did they know what we are only now beginning to understand in the language of science? And this is why, to me, it makes sense to go beyond science into the wisdom of our past. Because science is a language. It's a good language, but science is only one language that describes our world and our universe. And there are places where science has not yet understood how everything works. So there are other languages that describe our universe as well. So what happens? What happens if we go into our ancient past and if we marry the language of our past with the language of science? If we marry the wisdom of our past with the wisdom of today, doesn't it make sense to do that, to understand who we are and how we work in this universe? And that's why it makes sense to go into the ancient monasteries and into the ancient texts. So if we're going to use the divine matrix, we must first understand how it works. Secondly, we've got to speak the language that it recognizes. So people ask me this question all the time. They say, if this field is actually there, the question is, if the field is there, if the field is really there, and if the indigenous people know it, and if the ancient people know it, why don't we know it? What happened to our knowledge? Well, this is a very good question. And the answer is this. In our Western tradition, and when I say Western, I'm assuming that we are of the Judeo-Christian tradition, is what I'm talking about here. There was a time when this field and the language of emotion was part of our tradition. It was in our texts. Until the 4th century, the year 325 AD. In the year 325, something happened. Our texts were edited, and we lost tremendous amounts of information. The Emperor Constantine, in the early Christian church, with the early Christian Bible, had to make decisions. What information do we include? What information do we exclude? And what we know now is that at least 45 books were either completely taken away or tremendously edited into what we call today our Western biblical tradition. And when those edits were made, we lost the information that tells us everything is connected. We lost the information that tells us the language that speaks to this field. We know the information was lost because we are now recovering the information in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Nag Hammadi library, in the Coptic texts. This is how we know this information was lost. There are many places in this program where the entire day could be one topic, and this is one of those places. Because we could do an entire workshop on the information that was lost. And we won't today. But I wanted you to see an example of the books that were taken out of our text. This is some of the examples of the books. How many have heard of the missing years of Jesus? Have you ever heard of the missing years of Jesus? See in the back? The 18 missing years? Why are they missing? Why are they missing? In these books, there is not only a book, the infancy of Jesus, there is the infancy of Jesus, book 1. The infancy of Jesus, book 2, that tells about his childhood and tells about his learning of the power in his body to heal and to change his world. Why don't we see more women in the Bible? Ladies, have you wondered why there are not more women who have written in the Bible? Do you wonder that? We know that women lived a long time ago. Women were there. It's a promise, I guarantee. One of the reasons is because when the women would write, the male-dominated church would take those books out. There's a very powerful book that was written by a Gnostic woman. And even the title of the book is so powerful. Listen to the title. The title of the book is called Thunder, Perfect Mind. Thunder, Perfect Mind. Isn't that a powerful title? It was written by a Gnostic woman. And she asked the question. In her writings, she said, within me is a reflection of all possibilities. She said, I am the rich one, I am the poor one. She said, I am a virgin, and I am a whore. She said, I am the son of your mother and the daughter of your father. And I am all possibilities that you can ever imagine. I represent everything that lives within you. Why do you fear me? Why do you stone me to death at your city gates? What a powerful text. And I can see when the church fathers went down the checklist to say, what books do we keep? What books do we toss? Thunder, Perfect Mind. They said, it's gone. Because it was such a powerful book. But these are some examples of the books that were completely edited. They were taken out. These are the books, these are the books that were condensed. They were left in the text, but they were condensed and edited tremendously. Just to give you some example. Have you ever read the Bible and felt like it was incomplete? Have you ever read the book of Genesis? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God breathed the breath of life into the nostrils of man, and man became a living being. We were created in one sentence in the Bible. Where's the rest of the information? How were we created? When you go to any other spiritual tradition, there is paragraph after paragraph, column after column, page after page, talking about the creation of your soul and your body and my body and how it happened and who is responsible. But in our Bible, we have one sentence and everything else is gone because it was edited. What was taken out? There's not only book 1, there is book 1 of Adam and Eve, book 2 of Adam and Eve, that tell us the secrets of our origins, of our creation, of our heritage. So this is one of those places we could spend all day on this, and we will not, but I wanted you to see information was lost. When our texts were edited, information was lost from our tradition that was not lost from other traditions. And this is why it makes sense. This is why it makes sense to go to Tibet in the monasteries, to the mountains of Bolivia and Peru, Nepal, India, Italy, the desert Southwest, because there are records in those places that fill in the missing pieces, that complete the information. We found them in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Nag Hammadi library, there are the Gnostic texts, the Coptic texts, the Essene texts. Many of you have studied work that I did 15 years ago on the Essenes. That's when this picture was taken. I look different now. A little. No? More hair. So we know that the information was lost because it's being recovered, and this is what's important. Okay, I was trained as a scientist. And as a scientist, I was trained to look in the world around me for my answers. And as a scientist, what I know is this. If we're going to find information in other cultures that was lost in our culture, the best place to find that would be to go to some place that has been least disturbed by modern civilization. Tibet is a perfect place. It was in 1998 I had the opportunity for my first journey into Tibet. It is a land of tremendous extremes. Some places over 17,000 feet above sea level, where nothing grows. And other places in the valleys where it is very beautiful and everything grows. There's a diversity of people. Everyday people just living their lives. Nomadic people that share their stories. Look at this man. Look at this beautiful man. This man is a pilgrim. He walked across the Tibetan plateau for 8 months to get to one temple. Look at his eyes. Because after walking 8 months, he still felt that he was not worthy to be in the temple. So he began his prayers, full body prostrations, as he circled around and around and around the temple to be worthy to go inside. Amazing people in Tibet. Beautiful monks. And I know you all have seen the monks. I wanted you to see some of the nuns. Look at these beautiful ladies. Look at these beautiful ladies. This lady right here is about 125 years old. But she's strong. She's strong. Strong and healthy. Because Tibetans do not believe that we must age and die the way we believe in the West. They have a different belief. Look at these beautiful ladies. They have a powerful wisdom. They have pieces of knowledge that we once had and that we lost. And we come back from lunch, we will go into a monastery and we'll look at the library and we'll speak to the abbot and the monks in the monastery and ask them the questions of what they know that we've forgotten. Okay, there are other questions that are very good questions, and they lead directly to where we're going anyway. So I will answer the questions by continuing with the program, and we'll look at more questions after the break. Okay, if we do that? Is that okay? Good. Okay. So this morning was a very fast morning, and I shared with you examples of the science that tells us that we are connected to everything in our world, and that the language of our heart is a language that affects our world, and that is why I shared the experiments as I shared them. The summary of those experiments, number one, that all matter is connected. Number two, that there is a field of energy that exists in what we used to think of as the empty space. This field is called the divine matrix, the field, the mind of God, nature's mind, quantum hologram, all different names for this field. Number three, that when we create the right feeling inside of our bodies, in our hearts, that we make changes in the field beyond our bodies. And you saw an example. You saw an example of that with the healing of the woman and the cancerous tumor. So I wanted you to see those things early in the day before lunch. Now, I was trained as a scientist, as I mentioned. In my scientific training, I was trained to look in the world beyond, the world outside of my body, to understand the mysteries of the universe. So I asked myself the question, if there is knowledge that has been preserved in other traditions, where should I go to find that knowledge? And it makes sense to go to the parts of the world, to the places that have been least disturbed by modern civilization. And Tibet is a perfect candidate, because Tibet in the highlands of central China has been closed to the West until 1980. Only opened to the West in 1980. So it was in 1998 that I had the privilege and the blessing of leading my first group of pilgrims into the highlands of central China in Tibet. And I have been in 1998, in 2001, 2005, 2 times, and I'm going to combine all of those trips to share with you what we're finding here. In the book, The Isaiah Effect, some of you have read who has read The Isaiah Effect? Anyone? Oh, thank you. Okay, so one of the questions that came up was, what book do we speak about the Essenes? The Isaiah Effect is one book where we speak about the ancient Essenes, E-S-S-E-N-E-S, the Essene traditions. It was in the book, The Isaiah Effect, that I have a chapter that is titled Meeting with the Abbot, A-B-B-O-T, the abbot of the monastery. And this is the abbot here that we met with, this man. Isn't he a beautiful man? It's this man I asked the question I asked so many times. Every monastery, every nunnery, every monk, every nun, every abbot. We were in 12 monasteries and 2 nunneries over 22 days. I asked the same question again and again and again, and this is the man that gave me the beautiful answer. And I asked the question, this is the question. I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, what are you doing on the inside? So when we see the chanting for 12 hours, 16 hours, 20 hours a day, when we see the mudras and hear the mantras and the bowls and the bells and the gongs and the chimes and the incense, when we see your prayers on the outside, I said, what are you doing inside? What is happening? When we see you create a miracle of healing, how did you do that? And this is the power of going into a living culture like Tibet. Because if we go into a temple in Egypt, or we go to a temple in the Yucatan of Mexico, we can find knowledge, and it's interesting. However, to some degree, we guess, we speculate what that knowledge means. Because we're reading an old text or a temple wall and we're guessing. But here we talk to another human. We look him in the eyes, eye to eye, heart to heart, man to man, God to God. And I can ask this man the question, how did you do that miracle? What did you do in your body to make that happen? And I'll ask him again and again and again until I understand his answer. So this is what happened. So I asked the abbot, when we see your prayers on the outside, what's happening on the inside? And his answer was this. He said, you've never seen our prayers, because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things that we do to create the feeling in our body. The feeling is the prayer. The feeling is the prayer. He's telling us right here. He's telling us in a Tibetan monastery 17,000 feet above sea level in the Himalayan mountains, this man is telling us the secret that was lost in our Christian and Jewish traditions when the edits were taken in from the books. And they practice and they live this. Feeling is the prayer. Then he turned the question around and asked me. He said, how do you do this in your culture? And this is what happened. When we lost the texts, when we lost the words in our biblical texts that tell us that feeling is the prayer, we began to believe that the words are the prayer. That if we say the right words, the right time of day, or the right number of times, that somehow magically a prayer will happen. And when our prayer is not answered, we become frustrated and we think prayer doesn't work. The words are not the prayers. The feeling is the prayer. You're going to see this 3 times this afternoon. The feeling is the prayer. So this is what the abbot shared with us. Now, after we met with this beautiful man, and by the way, this man passed away last year. He is no longer in this world. So I'm happy that we had the time with him while he was in this world. Look at these books. These are Tibetan books. Very ancient books. Some of these books are 1,700 years old. They are loose pages in between the cover. Look at these. Look at this. Do you see how the pages appear so old that if you touch them, they would crumble? Can you see that? Can you see that? They do. These books are so old, if you open the pages, they will crumble into dust. However, what we know is for every page in this book, the page is created from a wooden block that has been carved with every letter perfectly replicated. It takes the monks 7, 8, maybe 9 months to create one block of wood, one page of the book. Each of these is one wooden block for one page of the book. So this is the information that tells the name of the book, the page of the book, the chapter of the book in Tibetan language. And this is the monk. We took that block of wood, we rolled ink, put a piece of paper, rolled the paper, and voila, brand new book, brand new image. So the information is not lost, even though the books are very old. The information lives on. So I asked the monk, I said, what is in these books? He said, everything. I said, what do you mean, everything? And he said, we have a record of every spiritual tradition that has ever come to this monastery. And then he poked me in the chest. He said, even yours. We have a record of your spiritual traditions. And I said, well, how do you know? And he said, here, I'll show you. And he pulled down a book, and you're going to see a piece of that book in just a moment. He began reading almost word for word the Essene Gospels that tell us the power of thought and emotion to change our world. And that's the book that he pulled down. Feeling is the prayer. This is what is taught in those Tibetan monasteries. The monks know it. The nuns know it. They have taught it They have practiced it for 1,700 years. Feeling is the prayer. Now, there's a catch, because not just any feeling creates the desired effect. Not just any feeling. Rumi has a beautiful prayer, a beautiful poem that tells us about this feeling. Rumi says to us, look at what he says. Rumi says, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. He says, out beyond our place of judgment, of right and wrong, there's a field. Rumi even calls it a field. He said, there's a field. I will meet you there. What is this place? What is the place that Rumi talks about that is beyond right and beyond wrong? What is that place called? It's beyond judgment and ego. The place where the feelings occur that create the healing and the miracles is a place that is beyond judgment and beyond ego. It cannot happen in the mind. It must happen in our hearts. Part of my heritage is Cherokee Indian, southeastern Cherokee. And there is a word, one word, in Cherokee traditions that means single eye of the heart. The one eye of the heart that sees what is, not the judgment or the bias or the fear. That word is Shante Ishta. Shante Ishta, C-H-A-N-T-E-I-S-H-T-A, Shante Ishta. The single eye of the heart, the eye that sees what is. That is the part of you where your power lives to heal your body, to heal the bodies of others, to create peace in your world. It's in the place beyond judgment and beyond ego. Now, in 2005, I was back in Tibet. For 39 days, I was in Tibet. That sounds like a movie, doesn't it? 39 days in Tibet. Maybe a book title. Okay, Marco, it's on a... The abbot that I showed you before has now passed away, and he's been replaced by this young abbot who is in his mid-80s. So he's now the younger abbot. And so I am now in the monastery with this abbot, and I'm asking him a question. I'm asking him the question, what is the force that connects everything in the universe? What is the force that holds everything together, that connects everything in our universe? Everything in our universe. Didn't make sense to me. So I said, please, one more time, what is the force that connects everything in the universe? His answer was one word. One word. And you'll never guess what that word is. Compassion. Now look at this. This is very interesting. I said, wait a minute. Is compassion an experience that we feel in our heart, or is compassion the force that connects the universe? And the abbot said, yes. That is a powerful understanding. That you and I are capable. We can have a feeling in our hearts. It's the feeling that the universe is made of. Compassion is both the force that connects and the feeling that we experience. And that is what makes compassion so very powerful. Now, our idea of compassion in the West is very different from the idea of compassion that we hear from the Tibetans. When we think of compassion, we think, oh, poor person, I need to help them. And that may be a small part. But a lot of compassion is the ability to see the world for what it is rather than our judgments of what we make it. And that is a lifetime of work for all of us. We're all learning that right now. Compassion is this force. So the ancient instructions, how do we do this? The instructions are very precise. In the Buddhist traditions, and what we're finding in Tibet, number one, they're saying that to create the healing, to create the peace, to create the miracles, first, we must feel as if the miracles have already happened without judgment, without ego. And that's hard for the Western mind. So first we must do this, to feel as if our prayers have already been answered without judgment, without ego. Okay, now, we're going to switch gears. We're going to go to a different monastery. This is a monastery in Egypt, in the mountains of Egypt. By the way, I saw Italian mountains for the first time yesterday with beautiful new snow. Did you see them? Beautiful new snow yesterday? Very beautiful, very beautiful. Thank you, Savannah. This is the mountains of Egypt. And this is interesting because when you think of Egypt, you don't think of mountains. You think of desert and ocean, sea. But this is in the mountains of Egypt. There is a very old monastery. This monastery is at the very base of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai of Exodus, the book of Exodus. This is called St. Catherine's Monastery. Have you been to St. Catherine's Monastery? Some of you have seen it? Okay, then you know what you're going to see here. On the outside, this monastery looks very old. This is a Coptic Christian monastery. The monks are Coptic Christians. They wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and begin their prayers. They go to sleep when the sun goes down. They have no electricity that they use. The electricity is there, but they don't use it. They burn oil for their light. They bake their bread in the sun. They pump their water from the wells every morning. It looks very primitive on the outside. Wait until you see the inside of this monastery. Would you like to see the inside? Okay, I was very surprised when we saw this. We walked, this is in the middle of the desert, nowhere in the desert. Look at the inside of this monastery. The first time I saw this, in the middle of the desert, I thought, how could they do that? And then I remembered the monastery has been there 1,500 years. They've had 1,500 years to decorate. So it's good. All right, it was in this monastery. I know that there is a hidden library in this monastery. Beautiful library. Part of it is open to the public, part of it is hidden. However, before you get to the monastery or to the library, you have to go past these rooms. Every monk who has ever lived in the monastery, their body remains in the monastery, so the energy of the monastery stays in one place. So for 1,500 years, every body of every monk that has died here, when the monk dies, they take the leg bones and put them in one room. They take the skulls and put that in another room. They take the rib cage and put it in another room. And they label them all so they can tell us where Brother John from 1604, where his skull is. They keep everything. They keep everything in this monastery, including the records of the ancient wisdom. So we ask the question, is there a secret library? And at first they said no, because they did not want us to see these rooms. The only way to get to the library is to walk past these rooms. We convinced them that we would like to see this library. They took us past these rooms, and we ended up in a room that looks like this. Now, can you see this door right here, the arch? Do you see the archway? And do you see this little window right here? There's a little window that's covered with brown paper. And this abbot right here, here's the abbot of the monastery. He's the man in the very back. I apologize, you can't see my pointer, but he's the man in the very center. I asked this abbot, can we look inside that room? And he said, no, it's not possible. And I said, please? And he said, we cannot. And I said, we've come a long way just to see this place. He said, okay. But he said, no photograph. No photograph. So I do not have a photograph. I want to tell you what's in this room. Now, this is an old monastery. They bake their bread in the sun. They use oil for the lamps. They have no electricity that they use. And we walked into that room, and all of a sudden, there is a room full of computers. Apple computer, Macintosh computer, IBM computer, scanners, satellite boxes. And I said, what are you doing in this room? And the monk became very serious. He said, we have been in this monastery 1,500 years. And we've been very fortunate because we have never been overrun by a foreign army. We've never been taken over. He said, but we think that this monastery will be destroyed in our lifetime. We think something will happen, that there will be a war in this part of the world, and this monastery will be destroyed. And he said, before that happens, we will scan every page of every one of our ancient texts onto the World Wide Web to preserve for future generations. And this is what they're doing, is they're recording all of the texts that are found in this library for future generations, putting it up onto the World Wide Web. So the question, what is in these texts that's so valuable? What is in these old texts that makes them so powerful? Well, some of the things that are in these texts are icons, pictures of Jesus. This icon was created within 300 years of the death of Jesus from the descriptions of people who lived with him and saw him. This may be one of the closest representations to Jesus that we actually have today. There are old, beautiful, illuminated manuscripts like this. Beautiful books, Coptic, Christian texts. Early Christian Bibles, only 100 or 200, 300 years after the time of Jesus. And this is why I brought you to this monastery. I want to share with you one of these texts. One of the texts that was edited from our Christian Bible is in this monastery. And we saw it, and you'll see a picture of it here. How many have heard of the Lost Gospel of Thomas? The Lost Gospel of Thomas. Some of you have heard of that text. Very, very powerful text. The Lost Gospel of Thomas is powerful because it is believed to be the actual words of Jesus as he was teaching those around him how to use the power of human emotion in his life. Now, I'm going to share two of these images with you. We said earlier, to unleash the force of the divine matrix in our lives, first, we have to understand how it works. And the science tells us how it works. Secondly, we must speak the language that the divine matrix recognizes, and science cannot tell us that. That comes from our past, from our culture, from our history. from those who have learned and used this language for thousands of years. So this is what we're doing right now. We're learning what did Jesus and what did the great masters say about this language. Because it's the same whether you're talking Buddhist or Hindu or Christian, pre-Christian traditions. They're all telling us that there is a field of energy and that we have the language to use that field. This is an actual page out of the Gospel of Thomas. So we know that this ancient gospel actually existed. And you can see some of the letters. These are Greek letters. You can actually read some of, if you know Greek, you can see some of the Greek letters right here. In the Gospel of Thomas, two very important keys. This was written right around 300 years after the time of Jesus. In this Gospel, okay, so here's what we're doing. We've been in the Buddhist monasteries in Tibet, and they're telling us that that feeling is the prayer, one. Two, that we must feel as if our prayers have already been answered. Okay, and now we're in an Egyptian monastery with the texts that used to be our tradition before they were edited, and we're going to look at the instructions that tell us how to do that. Okay if we do that? Is that good? Okay. Gospel of Thomas. If you have a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, this is verse 106, translated from the Nag Hammadi library. And if you do not have a copy, it's in our books, and you can go to any library and pick this up. Verse 106. Look at what the Lost Gospel of Thomas says. It says, when you make the two, thought and emotion, one. So the Gospel of Thomas is talking about thought and emotion. It's saying when you make your thought and your emotion one, look at what happens. You will say to the mountain, mountain, move away, and the mountain will move away. It's saying that when you can marry your thought and your emotion into one single potent force, that is when you have the power to speak to the world. The tumor that disappeared in the woman this morning, that is an example. When those practitioners had the thought of the woman being healed and the feeling and the emotions were all one, the mountain moved, the tumor disappeared. Okay, so this is one place. Now, secondly, when you make the two one, what are they talking about? What are the two? Let's go back to our image. The two, thought and emotion. When the two become one in our hearts, we create the feelings in our bodies. When thought and emotion become one, and you'll see how to do that in just a minute. Let's go back to the Gospel of Thomas, another verse. Now this is verse 48. It says almost the same thing. This was so important that it was recorded at least 3 different times in the same Gospel. Look at what this says. If the two make peace with each other in this one house. When Jesus is talking about the house or the temple, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? Precisely you. You are the house. You are the temple. If the two make peace with each other in this house, if thought and emotion become one, if they make peace with each other in this house, look what happens. They will say to the mountain, move away, and it will move away. He's telling us again, in a completely different verse, how powerful it is to marry thought and emotion. But they still haven't told us how. How do you do this? That's the next piece. In the early Christian Bible, your Bible today, there is a passage. How many have heard, ask and ye shall receive? Have you heard that before? Ask and you shall receive. Have you heard that? I know people that ask and ask and ask and nothing happens. Because the asking is not done with the voice. The asking is not done, please, please, bring this to my world. That's not asking. To ask, we must speak to the field, to the divine matrix, in the language that the field recognizes. In a language that's meaningful. The field doesn't recognize our voice, it recognizes the power of our heart. Remember this morning, our heart, we have a feeling, creates electrical waves, magnetic waves. That's the language the field recognizes. So when you create the feeling in your heart as if your prayer is already answered, that creates the electrical and the magnetic waves that bring that answer to you. And you're going to see this in just a moment. Ask and ye shall receive. While we still have this passage in our text, in the Bible that you have today, the King James Version, John 16, 23, 24, what you have is the condensed version. You have the edited version. The edited version looks like this. This is the edited version. Whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Hitherto have ye asked nothing in my name. Okay? Ask and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full. Okay, this is the edited version. This is so amazing to me because they took out the two sentences that tell us how to ask. In the 4th century, when the edits happened, they took those two sentences out. Would you like to see those two original sentences? Okay, we'll go back into the original Aramaic and we'll look at a new translation. This is the original Aramaic. It begins, it looks very similar. So this is the retranslated version with the missing pieces. All things that you ask straightly, directly from inside my name, you will be given. It says, so far you've not done this, because if we ask with our voice, we have not done this. Now here's the piece that was edited. Here is what was lost. Look at these two very powerful sentences. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. Look at what it's saying. It's not saying to speak a word. It's saying to be surrounded, to feel as if. If you are surrounded, you are feeling as if your answer has already happened. Be enveloped. If you want the perfect relationship in your life, if you want the healing in the body of your loved ones, feel the feeling of what it is like as if that has already happened. Be enveloped by what you desire, because that is when your thought and your emotion become one. You think the thought of the healing in your loved ones, and you feel the love of that thought. They become one, and that is the language that this field recognizes. Does that make sense? Are you okay with that? You're going to see an example of this, another example here in just a moment. Ask without hidden motive. What does that mean? Hidden motive. Ask without judgment. This is precisely what the Buddhists are telling us. Ask without the judgment of the right or the wrong or the good or the bad. Ask without the ego. Ask from the heart. Is this meaningful to you? Is this helpful at all? Let me give you an example then. Because to be, if it says be surrounded, that means to feel as if. To feel as if. Now, if that sounds too religious, because it's from the Bible, we spoke this morning about Neville. the philosopher Neville early in the 20th century. His book, The Power of Awareness. Look at what he says. It's the same thing. Neville says, you must make your future dream a present fact now by assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled to come from the place that it's already happened. Now, this is what those practitioners did with that cancerous tumor. I want to just elaborate on this a little bit. When those practitioners healed the woman with her tumor this morning, they did not judge the cancer as wrong or bad or right or good. There was no judgment. They accept that tumor as a possibility, one of many possibilities, because in the quantum world all things are possible. So they didn't say, bad cancer, you must go away. Or we're going to operate on you, or we're going to use radiation on you. They didn't do that. They accepted the cancer as it was, without hidden motive, without judgment. And they said, now we're going to choose a new reality by feeling, assuming the feeling as if the woman is already healed. So what they did was they felt the feeling as if the woman was fully healed, fully enabled, fully capacitated, already happened. And the chant that they were using, wasa, wasa, loosely translates into the words, already done. Already done. And then when they got excited, they said, mate, 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 means now, now, now. Not a year from now, not a month from now, not 5 minutes from now. Now, in the quantum world, now. And her body responded. It must. Physical reality must respond to the language that it understands. So in the Buddhist traditions, they are telling us the quality of the feeling. And in the Judeo-Christian traditions, they are giving us the instructions to be surrounded, to be enveloped, how to create that feeling. And when you put those all together, it's something that happens in our hearts, not in our minds. Feeling as if the prayer is already answered with no judgment and no ego, and feeling from the result. Feeling from the result as if it's already happened. Are there any martial artists here in the room? Karate experts? I studied martial arts when I was in my 20s and 30s, a little bit in my 40s and 50s. Have you seen martial artists when they demonstrate their focus by breaking a concrete block? Have you seen that? You've all seen that before, right? Okay, here's the secret. Here is the secret to breaking that block. When the martial artist is focused on that block, the very last thing that they are thinking is about their hand hitting the block. Because if they think about that, they know it will hurt. So they focus on what happens after their hand has passed through the block, as if it has already happened. They focus on a place below the block and feel the feeling as if their hand is already in that place. That is a metaphor, that is an equivalent for what we're doing with the power of emotion. Feeling as if the experience has already happened. When I left the corporations as an engineer, I moved into the high desert in the United States, a place called Nuevo Mexico, about 3,000 meters above sea level is where my home is. And there are indigenous people, native people in that area in the early 1990s. And it was during this time that this part of our country was experiencing the worst drought in over 100 years. No rain during this time. And a native friend of mine called me one day, and he said, "Greg, would you like to come with me to a place, a very special place, where my ancestors have gone for many, many years to pray rain? So would you like to come with me to pray rain?" Now, I like the language that he used, because he said this place is special because the skin between the worlds is very thin in this place. I like that language. So I met my friend, and we went to this place, and it was a circle of stones, kind of like this. Not this exact place, but very similar to this place. Now, I was not prepared for what I saw, because I believed I would see some dancing, some chanting, some singing, some Native American stuff. And that's not what happened at all. My friend sat down and took off his old shoes. With his naked feet, he stepped into the stone circle. He honored his past. He said the words, "All of my ancestors, all of my ancestors, all of my ancestors are with me now." And then he closed his eyes and he held his hands in a prayer mudra like this. And he turned his back to me for about 20 seconds. And then he looked at me and he said, "I'm hungry. Would you like to go get food?" And I said, "Yes, but I thought you were going to pray for rain." And this is when he looked at me and he said, "No." He said, "If I pray for rain, rain could never happen." He said, because the moment you pray for something, you have just acknowledged it is not here now. If you say, "Dear God, please let there be rain. Please let there be healing in my loved ones. Please let there be peace in the world. Please let my soulmate come into my life." If you say that, what you're acknowledging is that it is not here now. You remember, the divine matrix is very literal. If you say, "Please let," the divine matrix says, "Okay, I will let and let and let," because there is no completion, there is no outcome. Does that make sense? So I asked my friend, his name was David. I asked my friend David, I said, "If you did not pray for rain just now, what did you do when you closed your eyes?" Such a beautiful story. He said, "When I closed my eyes, I felt the feeling as if the rain has already happened." He said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like to feel my naked feet in the mud in my pueblo because there has been so much rain." He said, "I smelled the smell of what it smells like when the rain falls off of the earthen pueblo walls in our village." And he said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like when I run through the fields of corn and the corn is so high because there's been so much rain." He said, "And then I gave thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened."
From Gregg Braden's December 13, 2019 video, If We Embrace This, Everything Will Change Rapidly, at 28 to 54. There's a powerful difference between working toward that and coming from the place that already exists in your life, and this is not a new idea. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. I'm going to go back into one of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, where we were given the instructions for what you have just seen in that film. We were literally given the instructions. I think it's probably no surprise to most of our viewers, but the modern Bible as we see it today, as historical text. I'm not talking about religion. Just as a document of history. But that Bible has undergone some revisions. And one of the big revisions was in the 4th century AD. Or now Common Era c. the 4th century, when about 42 or 43 books were removed during the time of the Emperor Constantine. Or they were condensed, rearranged and translated in a way that appears as we see those books today. The question is, what did we lose in those 43 books? Well, we don't have to ask without the answer, because in the 1940s, 1947, 1948, right around, in their amazing discoveries in the Middle East revealed the oldest records of the books that had been at the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library. The Dead Sea Scrolls from the Old Testament. The Nag Hammadi Library from the New Testament. And in the Nag Hammadi Library, in the Gospel of Thomas, we actually find the instructions for the healing that you've just seen. I know that you've heard this before. You've heard the axiom, ask and ye shall receive, that your joy be full. You've also heard that sometimes things are lost in the translation. And this is one of those places. Because when we go back and translate the original Aramaic of ask and ye shall receive, here's what the text says. I'm gonna read this to you directly. The text says, ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer, be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. When we be surrounded with our answer and be enveloped by our desire, that is us being in the presence of the outcome of our prayer, as if it has already happened.